CBSE Board, Class 9, History, Chapter 2, Part 10, audio by Renee Matthew. In the previous audio, we saw that two groups were united, Petrograd Soviet, Bolshevik Party. During the Revolution of October, which happened on 16th October 1917, two groups were united to agree to a socialist seizure of power, and Leon Trotsky was made the leader of the Soviet group. By whom? By Lenin. After that, there was a great uprising on 24th October. There was a lot of trouble, and the Prime Minister of Russia, Kerensky, left the city to call troops so that they can take some defense against these groups. He understood that all the groups were becoming powerful. The anti-government groups were becoming powerful, so it was time for some war. And military people came according to the command of the Prime Minister, especially those who were loyal to the government. We saw that all the soldiers were not supporting the government. They came, they seized the buildings, especially of both the Bolshevik parties, especially the publication, that is the newspapers, were seized. Newspaper buildings were there. Then the troops which supported the government, pro-government troops means the troops which supported the government, were sent to take over both the telephone and the telegraphic offices, and also to protect the Winter Palace. So as a president, this is Kerensky, as a president it was his duty to support and defend the country. So he first called the military groups, and then he asked them to seize the buildings which published all these newspapers, who were behind the working of these newspapers. And then after that, he called the troops to take over the telephone and telegraph offices. Why do you think he did that? So that there won't be media coverage. The news will not spread. That is why he did that. And already there was a lot of revolt and revolution going on. And the next thing is to protect the Winter Palace. It was of much prominence in those days. And immediately, the response was swift. It was quick. The Military Revolutionary Committee, I told you which was that committee. It is a formation of both the groups, the Soviet and the Bolshevik. They ordered its supporters. So when the government is taking an important step like this, of course, the opposite party also will do something in return, where they asked their supporters to seize the government offices and arrest the ministers. Whoever came to attack them will have to be arrested. That was told by the opposite party. Okay? So late in the day, the ship Aurora, it shelled the Winter Palace. Okay? The ship Aurora, there was a ship which was known as Aurora. It shelled the Winter Palace, and other vessels sailed down the Neva and took over various military points. So Aurora belonged to the Bolshevik party. It shelled the Winter Palace, and then other vessels, which vessels means the ships or military flight which was there, all these things took over the other military points. And by nightfall, what happened? The city was under the committee's control, and after that, the ministers had surrendered because the group was so huge. You had the workers, the factory people working in the factories, then you had the peasants, some of the peasants were there, and also soldiers also joined, right? And during a meeting of the All-Russian Congress of Soviets in Petrograd, the majority approved the Bolshevik action. Everybody was supporting by this time the Bolshevik action. And it is not only that uprising took place in Petrograd, in other cities also there were uprisings. There was heavy fighting also, especially in Moscow. And by December, Bolsheviks completely controlled Moscow, Petrograd area. It started from Petrograd, and then the uprising shifted and transferred. From there it spread to Moscow, and both the areas were controlled by the Bolsheviks. Okay? So now there are some important points that you have to take note of. We can see that so many revolutions have come the way. Like February Revolution was there, then October Revolution was there. So you should note that the February Revolution was taken over by Lenin. That is when he came back from exile. That is one point where you can get confused. And Petrograd Soviet, everything was formed at that time. And it was time for Lenin to ask the Soviets to take over. Did you understand? And all the public meetings which had restrictions were removed. So everything was working towards these people. Why? What is the reason for that? Because most of the people in the provisional government were army officials, landowners and industrialists. So it began from February. That is what you have to write when you're asked for. Then the three theses is coming. The Bolshevik party forming the Communist Party. It is the basis of the Communist Party. Then the provisional government. We saw what all they did and the demands that they had and the changes that they wanted to make. And after that, we saw that the people in Russia, especially the countryside peasants, were not so quiet as France. And then when the Bolshevik influence grew, the government just retrieved. They stepped back. That is the provincial government. And all these things were taken into account because they became stronger and they started taking some stern measures. It was temporary. It did not last for a long time. It was temporary. And we saw how the peasants and countryside people wanted the leaders to redistribute land. Because in Russia, you should understand that private owning the land was a great asset. Even in France, in those days, it was like that. Okay, so landowners were many and most of the wealth accumulated on the land. And then we saw the formation of the land committees because of this incident. And then in July and September, a lot of revolutionary took place. So you should understand that it started from February, it went to July, September, and so many revolutionary acts took place. And then it comes to the October Revolution. It's a long way. And so much of uprising was taking place. And again, military revolutionary committee is very important, which was a combination of the Petrograd Soviet and the Bolshevik party together. And the new leader, it is not that Lenin was pushed off, but the person who controlled or worked upon it was Leon Trotsky, helping Lenin. And then it was a great move against the existing government, Kerensky and all that which happened and how it went on. So seizing the government was done by this side, and the other side was the government's intention was to protect all these things. They didn't want the news to just spread like that. And after that, what happened? Aurora comes in and there is a shelling of the Winter Palace. And Bolsheviks controlled the Moscow Petrograd area. That is what happened.